Welcome to Grapple Arts Radio.
Hi everybody, it's Stephan Kesting from Grapple Arts Radio and grapplearts.com. Today I'm talking to Scott Nelson from On the Mat, who's a jiu-jitsu pioneer, really. You've been doing jiu-jitsu since forever. Yeah. You've been involved in the online aspect of jiu-jitsu since forever, and you were there in the golden age of jiu-jitsu in North America. So I'm really looking forward to this and picking your brain, because I've known of you for years. I followed your website since the late 90s, but it's only been in the last year that we've actually ever met face to face.
It's crazy how you can know somebody but not really have ever. That's the internet. You can know somebody but not really have ever met them. So it's great, man. Thanks for having me on.
In the internet, we can all have lots and lots of imaginary friends, or virtual friends.
Virtual friends.
So that's much. So why don't we start in the beginning? Because you were training. You've been trained jiu-jitsu with a lot of people. But you were there, you came up under Half Gracie originally, is that right, or do I have that?
Originally, I started training jiu-jitsu with Hailson Gracie in Newport Beach, Rodrigo's dad. But I don't really count that because back then I lived about an hour and 15 minutes away. I could only go to class once a week. It was $60 a class, and we learned 3 moves a class, no sparring.
$60
a class, yeah.
Wow.
And so, I'd make the pilgrimage every chance I get. This was right after UFC 1 or 2.
3 moves a class, though, for that era, was pretty good, because there used to be 1 move a class or 1 move a week at some schools.
Yeah, so, I don't really remember what I was learning there, so I don't really count it. I think maybe 94, 95, I drove by Half Gracie School, and I hit up my friend Rob, who was training in Arizona with Megaton, and he had originally introduced me to jiu-jitsu, and I said, hey, who's this Half guy? Is he legit? And he just started laughing at me, and he's like, get your ass in there and find out. And man, sure enough, I went in there, and Half's legit. There's no doubt about that.
So who else was training? So you got up to purple belt under Half, right?
Yeah, I got my purple belt under Half, Still have a great relationship with Half. I love him to death. I still consider him like my jiu-jitsu dad, But yeah, I got my purple belt. Back then, when I first went in there, guys like Greg Rivera were training, Dave and Dan Camarillo were training, Cameron Earl and I both started right around the same time. Gumby was already training. Don Geddes, BJJ.org, Don Geddes was training. There was already a good crew of good guys there, a crop of blue belts already, but it was still very early in the jiu-jitsu days in the United States.
Do you remember what your first class was like?
Yeah, I remember my first class was taught by Bobby Southworth, and it was way different from training at with Hailson. And I remember we learned cross choke, we learned mount. We learned the RNC, and just a little bit of rolling around, and then it was immediately thrown to the wolves. It was right into a full hour or so of just getting mauled and training, and it was a way different atmosphere back then. It was you got fed to the lions, and if you came back, then you were accepted. But most people never came back. It was a completely different atmosphere. I used to ride a bus for about an hour every day to get there because I didn't have a car at the time, and it was great, man. I loved it, man. I missed those days in jiu-jitsu.
Well, a little bit after that, you started. You helped a lot with the BJJ.org site, which I remember because there were so few sites for information about jiu-jitsu and grappling back in the 90s that the sites that you were associated with, BJJ.org, I was there all the time, and On the Mat. With the old classic black screen of 2 guys wrestling on the front, because you guys had photos and stuff and downloadable videos and stuff. And this is years and years before YouTube.
Oh yeah, we were the very first jiu-jitsu or Valley Tudo site. MMA didn't even exist then, to have downloadable videos. They were 120 pixels by 240 pixels. Gumby. He worked for, I think it was IX Micro, and he was testing video compression then. We were lucky enough that my brother Cade, who's a black belt under Eddie Bravo and a brown belt under Jeff Glover, he was working at a place that had a server rack with no bandwidth. So
because at this time, bandwidth was insanely expensive.
Like we would have probably been paying like $3,000-$4,000 a month just for the bandwidth that we were. And this was back on modems. There was no high speed, so you would basically hook your computer to the telephone line, download the video, the jiu-jitsu match to watch, and you'd have to wait overnight for it to download. Hope it didn't crash or you got disconnected. You have to turn your call waiting off, and then you would download, you download the match and you can watch it in the morning. And that was the start of the whole thing. It started because I would go to jiu-jitsu tournaments with the guys from Team Half Gracie, and nobody was like recording our matches. So one of the guys, Joe, who was training there, had a video camera. I said, hey, can I use your video camera? I want to record our matches and the super fights so we could all have them to watch and study. And then Gumby was working at IX Micro and later at Apple doing video stuff. And being in Silicon Valley, we had the most high-tech stuff, access to stuff that people would have paid, literally tens of thousands of dollars to have access to. We got for free, so we were able to be the first guys to, like you said, have giant photo galleries, to have, one of the things I was most famous for back in the day is I don't know if you ever heard my interview with Valij Ismail about Ryan Gregg,
No, I must have missed it.
Man, have two kinds of man. Have one man on this side, how you say, chicken, cock. Have another man on this side, confident. And it was a crazy interview I did in Rio with Valij going nuts. We made it into a audio file. At that time, it was like maybe a 10-minute interview. The audio file was so big, we had to break it into 3 parts so people could download it. And it went viral before viral was a viral thing. And one guy even actually took all of the sound bites and made a Windows 95 desktop thing. So when you threw something away, it would say cock, or chicken, high and greasy chicken, and it was hysterical, that it's still up on YouTube, people have put it up on YouTube and cut it up and done a lot of funny things with it. Another video that was
the first BJJ meme.
Yeah, the first BJJ meme, exactly. And another video that we had that really went crazy was we were the first person to post up a video of Eddie Bravo submitting somebody with a twister in competition. I believe it was at the U.S. Open. I mean, we're talking 98, you know what I mean? Something like that. I don't know, Eddie could probably give us the date better than that, but we still joke around when I see him sometimes, he's like, hey man, you were the first person to ever make me have a name in jiu-jitsu, and I was just a blue belt, so it was a different time,
Well, it was a huge resource for those of us who were training at that time. I mean, we sound like a couple of old men right now. I remember when we used to have to feed the horses before going uphill to school both ways, but it was a lot different. So you were right in the heart of the California jiu-jitsu scene. So in the 90s, we're talking a culture with, I'm just thinking about how much jiu-jitsu has changed. I mean, back in those days, the guard was the closed guard. Yep. I still remember the first time somebody was saying, no man, you can open your guard. Mm-hmm. What? Why would you possibly want to open your guard? And, well, man, you can sweep them this way. You can sweep them. I think it was elementary spider guard or something. It was just such a change in how it was. I mean, you started right in the heart of it, close guard, mount, cross choke.
I mean, I think Half still, teaches that you never open your guard unless the guy opens it for you.
Oh, it still works.
Yeah, Kurt Osiander, that was our thing. We would practice to for someone never to be able to open our guard. It was just a different game. I mean, I think that the closed guard has really been forgotten. I go to schools all the time and train now, and I close my guard on people, and they're just clueless. They have no idea. They've never really been taught, how do I open the closed guard?
Here's how to counter the berimbolo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they can berimbolo me all over the place, but I close my guard and they're completely confused. So,
well, I guess there was so much of a connection back then between jiu-jitsu and MMA. Mm-hmm. Jiu-jitsu and Vale Tudo and jiu-jitsu and the UFC.
Sure.
That, and still, I mean, the closed guard has a ton of utility in MMA in a way that, say, the spider guard doesn't really, or people haven't made it work yet.
Yeah,
is probably the more accurate way of saying it.
I think a lot, and I think we talked about this at lunch, but I think a lot of the basics, techniques have been lost, and the effectivity of them have been lost. You know, I've gone back, and since my back surgery, I've been training with Henry Akins, who is the absolute master in basic jiu-jitsu, high level, advanced, very detailed basic. And
can we call it fundamental as opposed to basic?
Fundamental, yeah. I don't know if that's really the right word.
I think it's a sexier term.
Sexy, fundamental, advanced fundamentals. You know, like if Henry puts you in the close guard, you're tapped. You know, there's no getting out of it. You know, there's no, like he has it so mastered and down. And that's
he
the
came
same
up
way
under
Alf is,
Hickson,
too.
right?
Yeah, he was Hickson's fastest black belt. He was the head instructor at Hickson's school for 8 years, and he is a hidden treasure, definitely in the jiu-jitsu world.
So old school gangster.
Very gangster, yeah.
Well, you were talking about going to different schools, but you also went to Brazil, because I remember your early posts on some of the forums basically detailing your adventures in Brazil, training in Brazil, and going around and basically telling people who wanted to do the same thing what they could do. So when was the first time you went to Brazil?
First time I went to Brazil was in 1999. I went with two guys from House, Mickey O'Riggs and Greggy Rivera. And we went down there to train at Gracie Barra. It was back when they still had the cloth mats and stuff. And yeah, I wrote an article on the Mat that got me in a lot of trouble with people. It's called So You Want to Train in Brazil. And I just really broke it all down. Like I broke down all the steps that I went through as far as getting a visa, a plane ticket, like everything to get there. I'd never been there. I had traveled all over the world, so it wasn't like I was, you know, naive to international travel. But, you know, going down to Brazil the first time, like all the stories you would hear about it and the favelas and stuff, and there was no resource for me whatsoever other than to ask Brazilian guys at the academy, who I really think they just try to scare you more than they tried to help you. So I really, I detailed everything in that story, like everything from, you know, being robbed by the police to being solicited by prostitutes to solicited for drugs to like everything, just very honest, really, you know, just told it like it was. And, picking up girls, talking to girls, dealing with the girls down there, which has been a theme of what's gotten me in trouble quite frequently. Yeah, it pissed off a lot of people, you know. Elio Gracie was mad at me. Kleber was mad at me. Like a lot of these, the jiu-jitsu royalty, you know, just did not like the article. They did not like what it was. And I was like, you know, I actually had a talk with Kid Pellegro about it. You know, he's, you know, huge ambassador of the sport, you know, someone who's given me guidance and being like a reporter or a journalist in the sport. And you know, we sat down at one of Kleber's tournaments, and, you know, he's like, you know, hey, you know, like these people are mad because of this, that, and the other, you know. He's like, well, what do you think? I was like, well, what do you think? You know, he's like, well, it was pretty blunt. It was pretty blash, you know. He's like, people don't like to hear about like drugs and prostitution mentioned with jiu-jitsu. And I'm like, man,
Well, you are going to run into it if you go down there.
Yeah, if you go down to Brazil, like this is what it's like. And he said, well, if he's like, you know, he basically was like, you know, if this is, you're being honest and this is your trip and this is it, you know, he's like, it is what it is, you know. And I was like, you know, I changed a little couple things, you know. Hal said to me, he said, look, just, you know, take out this part, take out that part. And, you know, I had a relationship with some people from the Rolling Stones. I've been on tour with the Rolling Stones and stuff. And some of those people were down in Brazil when I was down there. And, you know, basically the cops were getting them their drugs, you know what I mean? And that's what I wrote about. And, like, it really, like, pissed off some people who were, like, jiu-jitsu practitioners who were also Brazilian police officers. They felt like I made all of, you know, for some reason sometimes when you say things like as that a generality, you know, like you know, people, especially like my experience has been with foreigners, is that like they take it like, oh, you're painting the whole country, everyone in the country, and they were mad. Oh, you're making it look like every police officer is a drug dealer in Brazil. And I'm like, well, no, that's not what I said at all, you know, like. But so I took a few things out of it, but for the most part, I just stuck to my guns, you know, and like, this is what it is. This is what happened. So some people liked me for it. Some people didn't.
So now you've been back to Brazil since, and it's evolved, and the jiu-jitsu experience there has evolved as well. So what advice would you have for somebody who wants to go down this year as opposed to getting their Lamborghini and go back to the late 90s and go to Brazil? What about Brazil now?
Man,
training?
I haven't been down to Brazil for a minute, but I would say anybody who is a practitioner of BJJ, you have to go. It's like making the pilgrimage to Mecca. You can't, I hear from people all the time, all the good guys are already here. Yes, the top echelon of like world champion black belts, a lot of them have left Brazil to follow their careers and follow the money, as they rightfully should. But no, all the best guys are not here. There's a whole different layer of unbelievable guys that will never have the money or don't have the desire to even to compete or to leave America. And you have to go. It's where it all came from. It's great to go back to the old academies. I mean, that was something when I moved to Brazil. After I visited Brazil, I fell in love with the place. I came back to America. I literally sold everything I owned, my cars, my motorcycles. I had a high-paying Silicon Valley job that I quit, stacked up all my cash. I packed everything I owned into 3 boxes in a suitcase, and I moved to Brazil to, follow the dream. And I think that everybody who's, can or who wants to should make that happen. Even if you just go down there on a vacation, I would say try to go for at least a month. It takes like a month to really feel it and figure it out. But if you can only go for a week or 2 weeks, go for a week or 2 weeks. I always suggest that people reach out to my old roommate who came to live with me after I had kind of a jiu-jitsu gringo compound in Brazil, is Dennis Ash at Connection Rio, who actually has some of my old furniture from when I lived there that got passed along. And it's it's been a tradition of years and years of gringos going down and sleeping on those beds and training hard and really living that jiu-jitsu lifestyle. It is not the same in America. It's just not the same.
What about schools they should train at? I mean, back in the day, you really were running the risk of alienating anybody you were training with here if you didn't go train at the home school there. If you went and trained with, say, you were at Gracie Barra here and you went and trained with Carlson Gracie in Rio, or you were Torrance Gracie here and you went and trained with somebody else in Sao Paulo, you were threatening your jiu-jitsu relationships. You would be called a créanche, like a traitor, essentially.
I was physically threatened on multiple occasions for training at multiple schools in Brazil, but I think that luckily jiu-jitsu has grown above that. I think people can go and train. I recently did the Sub and Surf Jiu-Jitsu camp that Rafael Lovato was teaching at, and we had students from all different backgrounds, from different schools, come down there, train together, and I spoke to them, and nobody really seemed like any of their instructors was like, if you go down there, you're cut from the team, blah, 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 you can never come back. So I think that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has matured, and people have matured in the industry as business people and realize that, students aren't slaves, they're customers, they're clients, they're long-term clients, and you need to teach them, treat them with respect, and, you want to keep them long-term. Back then it was a whole different attitude, you couldn't go train somewhere else. They wouldn't let you in there, and 2, you wouldn't be able to go back. But, hopefully, like a lot of the articles that I wrote back in the day about that subject, and the fact that when I went to Brazil, I went and trained literally from Manaus in the Amazon with Fredson Paixão up there, all the way down into Florianopolis and way down into the south of Brazil also, and stopping at every little place in between, because I just wanted to share jiu-jitsu with the world through my website and my videos. And also for me to experience it, I don't, you know what I mean? I just wasn't that kind of guy. And I was lucky enough that even though I trained with Half, and Half knew that I was loyal to him, I always wanted to get my belts and get promoted. Before I got promoted to brown belt by Nino, we called Half to make sure it was okay. Even though I hadn't trained physically at the Half Gracie school for years, Half's, like I say, is like my jiu-jitsu dad, and I always ran stuff by him. He saved my life in Brazil a few times when people wanted to, literally were threatening to beat me up in the streets.
Okay.
And stuff
no,
like that.
No. We're not going to just let that go. Tell us a story.
There's just, it's just been different ones. There was a times when I, originally when I went to Brazil, I trained at Gracie Barra, and there's a lot of really cool people there, like Carlinhos. I always thank him so much. He helped me get my apartment there. He helped me get my visa. He helped me move there, and I think he understood that. We would have a lot of talks about business and life and stuff, and we would meet in his office, and maybe he realized that like I was looking at things on a bigger picture with jiu-jitsu. And however, some of the students in the school, they didn't see eye to eye with that necessarily.
Because you were from a different school?
I was from House, which was considered, part of Gracie Barra, but I would go to Carlson's. Like Carlson was one of my good friends, like I had a great relationship with Carlson, and I would write articles about guys there, and I would shoot video over there. And when I was there, I would train. I would put a gi on and I would train, you know what I mean? Like Master Carlson Gracie tells you to put a gi on and get your butt on the mat. Who am I going to say no? Or, of course.
He's a pretty intense individual. You don't say no to him.
Yeah, it's hard to say no to that guy. He was a pretty charismatic guy too. So, and I went all over the place, and I trained all over the place, both in Rio and all over Brazil. But like, my alliance was always to Half, and there was a time for a while there was a private place that you could go train called Casa de Carlos, who was a wealthy guy there, and he had a private gym where Daryl Gollard taught wrestling, and all of the top guys, it was the first place where all the different schools, the top guys would go meet and train. And word got out that I was there training with guys like Shaolin, Bustamante, both the Nogueira brothers were there, Arona was there. I was literally at one time...
It's kind of like a Brazilian top team.
No, but it was guys from Nova União were there. Like all, there was only a couple schools that didn't really participate in it, and Gracie Barra was one of them. And like people found out that I was over there training. Of course, Daryl Gollard is also like a very good friend of mine. When he invited me to come train wrestling with him there. And that didn't go over very well with some of the guys at Baja, and like there was threats were made to me, and they were trying to like excommunicate me out of there. And,
but earlier you said you used the word saving your life.
Well, yeah, I was getting to that. Well, basically, pretty much
they were threatening to kill you for training with Daryl Gollard?
Well, not kill me. Like saving my life is an exaggeration. Excuse my exaggeration, but if guys want to if somebody wanted you to disappear in Rio, it's not hard to make you disappear. I never really felt like my life was like actually in jeopardy, but like I was, basically getting threatened to be thrown out of Gracie Barra. And if such happened, then anytime they saw me on the street, I could expect to have to fight them. There's a different age of jiu-jitsu, you know what I mean? Like you would have back then guys like Macaco and High and Gracie, if they saw each other on the street, it was going to become full-out warfare. Like they destroyed a sushi restaurant in Sao Paulo one time just with them fighting, and there was still like lots of people would fight on the beach back then. There was a big time team rivalry there, and this is when jiu-jitsu wasn't about like scoring advantages, scoring points, or anything like that. Like jiu-jitsu was about fighting then. That's something that's really lost in jiu-jitsu. Like jiu-jitsu, like Half said a long time ago, like somebody asked Half, how come we don't bow before we go on the mat? And he said, because this isn't a martial art, this is a martial science. You know what I mean? We're like here to fight. That's what we're here to do. And that's what we used to do in class. It was a fight. Now it's a sport. It's not even the same thing. Like people aren't like learning the techniques to learn how to fight. Back then we would learn techniques to beat other martial arts. Like you had to develop skills to use against a wrestler. You had to use skills to go against a stand-up guy, like different things. Now jiu-jitsu is learn to beat another jiu-jitsu guy, but that's not how it used to be. You know what I mean?
So you both pulled guard.
Yeah, now you're scissor banging. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it was just a completely different game back then. It was a different mentality. Being on a jiu-jitsu team back then was almost like being in a jiu-jitsu gang in Rio. People, it was taken very, very seriously.
I've run into Brazilians who had no connection to Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and they've had a very poor opinion of the Gracie family. Because they're basically like, those guys is almost like saying the Crips or the Bloods or the Gracies, and they had stories about, friends of theirs getting beat up by these guys for imagined or real slights. But it was, we have this image now. It's been sanitized. That it was, this noble tradition, and it was certainly, but it was also pretty hardcore. It didn't take much to get things violent.
Heated, yeah. I mean, if you see the Birth of Vale Tudo video, you can see, back then, how Henzo Hayan, they cleared out their parents' house and turned it into literally a fight club, and people would fight all the time. When I was in Brazil, the summers in Brazil, it wasn't uncommon to see a fist fight break out on the beach, and people watch, and then the fight was over, and that was that. And even if the cops came, they would watch and wait and see what happened. But it was very machismo. It was very man-on-man. People weren't jumping in. There wasn't knives and guns and any of this stuff. And yeah, people talk about when I was living in Brazil and I was dating girls and I have cauliflower ears. I learned really quickly to never say that I did jiu-jitsu. When they would ask me about my ears and ask me if I was a pitchy boy, if I did jiu-jitsu, if I said yes, you know what I mean, then I was trash. I was instantly get the hell away from our daughter. So I learned really quickly, I'm a boxer. That was fine. That was completely acceptable. Oh, you're a boxer? That's great, and almost never ever tell anybody that you had, outside of jiu-jitsu, that you had anything to do with the Gracie family at all. They were considered bullies and thugs, which is why I think it's kind of funny all the time now. You see all this anti-bully stuff, anti-stuff, and it's just wow,
everybody can grow up, everybody can change, everybody gets a second, third.
That's all we were, was bullies, come on.
Well, tell me how you got you might also be, in addition to being one of the first guys to do the whole website thing, you're also one of the first guys to get a double black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
So tell me about the double black belt.
Yeah, so I was with Jeff Glover. I've been going down and helping the guys out with the Sub and Surf Jiu-Jitsu Camps down in Costa Rica, which is, they're awesome. I'll give them a quick plug because they always take me along, subandsurf.com. They've got a killer setup. They've got a great set of mats down there and a great thing going for training camps down there. And I did the training camp with Jeff Glover down there. I had been training 17 years in jiu-jitsu before I got my black belt. I unfortunately had a couple of injuries, the worst of which being a major back surgery. I blew out a disc in my back and I broke 3 vertebrae that took me off the mat took me out of life almost for 3 years. And coming back from it has really forced me to change my jiu-jitsu game and to really...
So you're all inverted guard now?
Yeah, all inverted guard. I don't play anything else but I never go on top. And no, but I was just down there with Jeff, and I was training with some of the guys down there and doing really well. And my brother my younger brother Cade is a student of Jeff's. And so he promoted Cade to his brown belt while we were down there. And I guess he just got a hair up his ass. What he told me? He said, Scott, you've been training jiu-jitsu longer than me. And every time I look at you with a brown belt on, it makes me really sad. He's like, there's no reason why you shouldn't be a black belt. And so he gave me a black belt, which I've had other people try to, promote me in the past to different belts that, Half was my instructor, and my dream was always to get no matter where I went and where I trained, Half put so much time into me, and we're close, Half's put me in the hospital multiple times, but he's also saved my life in Brazil, and it's just it's that relationship, how it was. It's back then, when we would go in there, we beat the living crap out of each other, and then afterwards we go out to eat and hang out, and we're just a very, very tight clique group, if you made it through the grinder at a house, you were in, you know what I mean? It was a clique, it was a gang, it was whatever you guys want to call it, a cult, whatever you people that's what we were, and I'm not apologizing for it. I love it, and those people, all those people that still have come through there, I can call any one of them up at 3:00 in the morning, pick me up at the airport, and they'll come get me. So, that's what I always kind of figured. And Nino was under Half as an extension of that. So when Nino came by my house, and I trained with Nino when I was a white belt. I trained with Nino when I lived in Brazil for years. I was very close to him and his brother and his family. They took a lot of care of me when I lived in Brazil. So, Jeff gave me my black belt. It was a little bit weird. It was a little awkward, and because I hadn't talked to Nino about it or Half. So, of course, social media goes nuts. I think I got 1,700 posts on my black belt promotion on Facebook. But it was also like I had a little explaining to do when I got back. But, luckily Nino was really cool about it. He's like, man, I would have given you your black belt if you'd been consistent for a while ago. So I got back, and then we did an official black belt ceremony at Nino's school, and he gave me the black belt too. So I'm a dual black belt under Jeff, which is great because Jeff's one of my best friends, and we grew up in jiu-jitsu together. And then Nino is like my official instructor.
So now you wear them both at the same time.
I wear 2 black belts at all times. Yeah, pretty much.
You just never know when you need that. So tell me a little bit about the whole gi and clothing thing, because recently, or not that long ago, on the Underground Forum and also on Facebook, you had an Ask Me Anything about building a brand, building a fight brand.
Yeah.
And of course, you've got a huge amount of experience with the whole making gis, getting gis sourced. So whatever gave you the idea to start making jiu-jitsu gis?
Well, what gave me the idea to make jiu-jitsu gis was really back in the days when you and I started training. Jiu-jitsu was very hard to get a Brazilian jiu-jitsu gi. Most of us wore judo gis or one of those KI piece of crap gis that would fall apart. And oftentimes you would get a gi. You'd have to wait for someone to come from Brazil, hope they had your size, hope it fit right, and hope it wasn't a piece of crap and fall apart because you were about to overpay for it like crazy. And Brazilian, gringo tax. And so I had met Scott from Kickskin and talked to him a lot about making gis. And he was really the first American guy that I knew of that. He sponsored Dave Camarillo and he sponsored Half, and he trained with us. And I talked to him a lot about gis. He's since passed, and Dave Camarillo used to have a lot of cool judo gis because he was such a high-level judo guy. And he would go all over the world, Japan, Europe, everything, and he would bring back gis. And I don't know why, I just kind of got obsessed with how gis were made. And I can remember a day where Dave had brought a few judo gis over to BJ. We used to train in BJ Penn's living room. He had mats there. And Dave had some judo gis, and BJ had just brought back a few different style of gis from him being in Brazil. When it was actually when one of the times, I can't remember I think he had come back from being a brown or purple belt fighting down there. It might have been when he was a purple belt and he fought Ted a Day. And so he brought those gis back, and so we were just sitting there we were all talking about the differences in gis, and it was well, how come they do this in judo and why can't they do that in jiu-jitsu? And I just got a bug up my butt. I said, I want to try to make some gis. So I started trying to make gis in America back then. And I was going around trying to figure out how to get them made and going down to LA to the garment district and trying to get them made. And I basically realized you couldn't get it done in America. We didn't have that equipment in America anymore. It had all been sewn to China and stuff. And so then, this is pre Alibaba, and the internet was still, there was no high-speed modem or high-speed internet, at that time. And I started sourcing judo gi factories in Pakistan. Scott from Kickskin told me he got his gis made in Pakistan. And I started getting samples sent over. Well, it cost $150 per sample, and they all sucked. All these bad gis came back. And then fast forward to 1999, and I went down to Brazil for the first time. I started going to a couple factories down there. I went to the Torah kimonos and to the Krugen's factory. Krugen's factory was right near parents' house. And I started buying gis from them, and I brought back 24 gis with me, and then I sent some of those gis over to Pakistan to try to get them copied, and they still came out messed up. And then after I went to Brazil and I fell in love with it, I moved down to Brazil for 3 years, and while I was there, I started going to every factory I possibly could. I went to factories in Sao Paulo. I went to every factory out there. And I started to learn Portuguese then, so I could talk to people. And a lot of times I would just sit in the factory and act like a dumb gringo and just listen to what was going on and stuff. I remember one time I was in a factory and Margarita came in and he was getting his pants customized so that they would be much harder for somebody to toreando him. He was going to be fighting a solo in the Worlds that year, and so he had his pants changed to improve his performance. You can do a lot of changes to a gi that people don't know about. I've often thought about coming out with a video or an ebook or something about, like, I still to this day I see people cheating with the changes in their gis. It's not as much as it used to be because IBJJF is off on top of it, but every once in a while I'll see a gi do something and I can tell that it's
well, the custom sleeves used to look like a long sleeve T-shirt sometimes.
Right? Yep.
With a tight fit, and
there's all kinds of little tricks you can do. Like,
I remember I once was I took a Teflon spray or a silicone spray and tried coating my lapels in the silicone spray.
Well,
hoping
I'll give you one that I learned in Brazil. The way you do it, all right, I don't know if this is bad to tell people how to cheat or not, but it's called soaping the gi in Brazil. And what you do is you take some detergent and you make kind of like a soupy mix of water and detergent, and then the areas that you want to be slick on your gi, like maybe around your neck where you're grabbing or behind your elbows, you just kind of paint that water on there. Then when the gi dries, you can't feel it at all. But when the person's hand starts to get sweaty, it kind of activates that soap, and it makes the gi slippery.
Where were you during my competition career? That would have helped a lot.
I was around. We were at a lot of the same tournaments. So yeah, the gi thing, man, like I just got obsessed with it, and I ended up flying over to Pakistan, having a crazy story. There's my interview that I tried to get on that TV show, Locked Up Abroad. The interview my friend did for me to get on that show is on YouTube. You can find it if you just Google wholesale BJJ gis Pakistan. It comes up right away, and I had a crazy story going over there. But
Well, what happened?
I thought I was getting kidnapped. I was over there by myself, being a white guy in Pakistan. I had the shaved head, jiu-jitsu cut back then. They probably thought I looked military. My hotel room got broken into, nothing stolen, but everything gone through. I had people prank calling my room, shooting guns off outside my room, like jiggling my door. They took like the safety locks and the chains off my door. And I just, basically if they wanted to kidnap me, they could have come got me at any time, but they just scared the crap out of me for a night while I was there, and I got my ass out of Pakistan pretty quickly after that. But while I was there, I took all the technology and the ideas and my notes and my samples from being in Brazil and going to so many factories in Brazil, and then I sat there in factories and taught them how to make gis. Like I literally stood there over their sewers. I helped change the patterns. I was the first person to ever make a sport cut gi. You remember those old gis used to be like a plastic bag with two arms sticking out of them. They fit terrible. I mean, pretty much everybody uses some modified part of my original slim fit cut lucky gi style. I took all the bagginess out of the armpits. I made tapered sleeves instead of like tubes that they were. I put a triple gusset from the karate pant into the pants, so you could do a full split in a gi pant. I don't know why anybody didn't. It's not like I'm trying to pat myself on the back too hard. It wasn't like genius. It just made sense. Like, why wouldn't you make, I remember the old gi pants where the crotch would hang down to the middle of your knees. You try to open your guard and you couldn't because your gi pants wouldn't open. So I brought the crotch way up. I actually brought a pair of girls' low-cut jeans to Pakistan and said, how can we make it fit more like this, that led to me doing the lucky gis, and since then I've gone on to go to China and make gis in China, and I just love making gis and trying to innovate and change things with gis.
Well, I got to ask, clearly you make gis, you make everything from beanies to t-shirts to whatever, the whole apparel. So why would you as a manufacturer have all these Ask Me Anything threads giving away your secrets to arguably your competitors?
I'm dumb maybe. I don't know. I like to help people a lot, and no one helped me with just going to Brazil. It's funny. I write these articles because I think they're going to help people. I went down to Brazil and there was nobody to ask any questions about Brazil. How do I get a passport? How do I do any of this stuff? And so I was like, okay, I'm going to write this article detailing everything that I did, going down there, So the same thing with the gis, I have personal friends and clients that have been ripped off for tens of thousands of dollars in Pakistan. I had a friend that almost lost his house because he used to buy gis from me. He got one of those crazy emails that says I can make you a gi for $1, and he got a good batch of gis or 2 good batches of gis, and then he rounds up all the money he can and he wires it over to Pakistan, and zip, he gets nothing. So I just was hearing stories and stuff about people having problems, so I decided I'm going to try to help people. You know what I mean? Maybe as a competitor, it's not the smartest thing to do, but I like to help people. And, now that my business is established, I've been OTM since 1996. I want to kind of start a consulting program and help people. One of my idols is Stacy Peralta from the skateboard thing. And that's exactly what he did. After he built Pal Peralta, he went out and he worked with guys who were top pros and people that were in the industry, and he worked with them and he helped build all these other sub brands and other new brands that came up and became huge. And, that's what I want to do. I want to help other people that you want to grow and love the sport of jiu-jitsu as much as I do, as we do. And their heart's in the right place and they want to do cool stuff. Well, I want to be their mentor and I want to help them do that. So if anybody out there is listening and you want to start your own jiu-jitsu, MMA, fight gear brand, hit me up. I'm looking for people to work with. Maybe we partner. Maybe I just help you consult. And the more people that are doing it, the bigger the sport gets. The bigger the sport gets, the better it is for all of us.
Well, do you have anything else other than gis that you're working on right now? What are some of the exciting projects that you got coming up?
The thing that I have right now that I am absolutely most excited about is one of my best friends, Henry Akins. We talked about him before. He was Rickson's fastest black belt ever. He trained with Rickson the whole time through when he was fighting in Japan, and he went on to be the head instructor for 8 years, I think it was. He was Krohn's instructor at Rickson's Academy. I think he started as a secretary or something there and worked his way all the way up. No one knows about him. And after I had my back surgery, I ran into him, and we had trained together a little bit before, but back then it was even with us being really good friends, he would show me some stuff, but back then, if you were in Rickson's camp and you showed Rickson's stuff to other people and the word got out, you could get kicked out of the camp, And, there was family secrets, that you weren't, and they are secrets, yeah. Henry Akins knows stuff about jiu-jitsu, little things that he's taught me that I show other people that are people like us, seasoned black belts, that go, holy shit. You know what I mean? It opens an entire new doorway into your jiu-jitsu, and it might be the littlest thing is turn your hand from this grip to that grip and apply pressure, just little things.
It's a game of inches, and sometimes that
millimeters,
inch matters, yeah.
And so I ran into Henry, and he asked me about my back surgery and said, hey, you're a black belt now, you need to come train with me. And I was like, Henry, my jiu-jitsu sucks, man. I was better when I was a purple belt. I can't move. I've lost my core strength. I had to have the muscles cut out of my back and in my crotch and stuff and everything. And he was just basically shut the F up, get your butt up to my class and let's train, man. I'm going to help you. And man, life-changing, just he got me back in the game, he showed me so many holes in my game, and I'd be so close to doing a technique right. And he would just change an angle, change a grip, and the way that he teaches it's very conceptual jiu-jitsu, and he teaches theories and concepts so you can apply them at weight distribution things. Everyone calls Rickson's jiu-jitsu invisible jiu-jitsu, and in some ways I understand why they call it invisible jiu-jitsu, because it's a little thing that you can't change. But Henry said something that I thought was really, really cool, and what Henry said was that it's not invisible, it's just hidden. Once somebody shows it to you, you'll see it every single time. And since then, I've been watching a lot of Krohn's matches, and I watch other guys' matches, and I see it now. Now that he's taught it to me, I totally see it. But he I'm happy that he's decided he wants to start teaching this stuff. The long story short is the project basically is I've been working with Henry. We've created a video series that is absolutely amazing. It's nothing it is very, very advanced fundamentals. Anybody who's ever trained with him or anybody that's ever seen him train and stuff will tell you that, like people talk about John Danaher, and like I've trained with John, and John is phenomenal. He's amazing, and Henry is kind of like on that same type of level. He was an engineer, and he learned, he breaks jiu-jitsu down into concepts and ideas and theories, but he does nothing fancy whatsoever. So everything that I've learned from him, I can put into my game immediately, and I can do it. It's not like some crazy flexibility is required, some strength is required, or anything. It's real jiu-jitsu, man. It's real jiu-jitsu.
Well, that's exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
It's gonna be awesome. It's gonna
so that'll come out.
It's gonna shake things up.
That'll come out through On the Mat.
It's Henry's project. He's doing it, but of course I'll be promoting the hell out of it. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, it's been super interesting talking about the going down memory lane, and we're still both here, still both kicking.
It is, man.
So
it's good to spend some time with you, man. I want to say thank you. I've enjoyed a lot of your leg locks videos back in the day, and your X guard, and we've sold your products and supported your products on our site, and I know you've always supported us. So, man, thank you. Appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, take care, Scott.
Yeah, thank you.
In addition to these podcasts, I also put out a regular newsletter on training. It's very, very jiu-jitsu centered. It's a ton of in-depth information about different aspects, different techniques, different tricks, different tactics, different training methods around jiu-jitsu, ground fighting, no-gi grappling, and even MMA a little bit. So if you go to grapplearts.com/newsletter, you can sign up for free. If you don't like what you get, there's an unsubscribe button at the bottom of every single email you're ever going to get. We'll part as friends, no harm done, you tried it out. But I get a lot of feedback from people saying that they found these emails super useful in their training, even a little bit inspirational. So go to grapplearts.com/newsletter and try it out. It's completely free. It always will be. There's no obligation. It's really easy to leave if you don't like what I give you, all right? Check it out. Take care. Good luck with your training.